One of the biggest things holding the Chicago Bears back so far this season has been a lack of contribution from some of their biggest offseason additions. Now, we should have some patience for the rookies, but the veteran free agents don't have much of an excuse.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And on the show today, I want to use this bye-week time to evaluate a storyline that I think has lingered, but maybe we don't always look at it fully big picture in terms of the Bears just not getting enough from the moves they made this offseason, and that feeling like maybe the biggest factor of anything as to why they didn't start as hot as we liked them and still haven't necessarily been able to really put it all together for a full dominant 4 quarters, except against, Dallas Cowboys and Matt Eberflus in their revenge game. So we'll look at the free agents and the trades from this offseason and why the grades don't look great, and the grades look even worse for the rookie class, but at least rookie class feels like it has a little bit more of a built-in patience and I think some, if not excuses, some real explanations for that group. And maybe the bigger picture question here is also the moves that the Bears didn't make. The things that at the time we were like, hey, maybe they should address this, or we'd like to see them address this, and they didn't. Not just hindsight saying, oh, they should have known X, Y, or Z, but said, no, at the time we were looking for this, and lo and behold, it becomes a problem when they don't address it the way that maybe we thought they should have back at the time. So, like, for example, it's a little bit tricky to grade this rookie class, and yet it's been something that has been a closely monitored group this season because everyone compares Colston Loveland to Tyler Warren at every possible turn, and I get it. That's going to happen for the rest of their careers. I'm not saying that, that's it is unfair, but I don't want to say that it's not surprising, I guess what I should say. But one of them is on a team that is firing on all cylinders and, not a brand new system for everybody else involved. And I guess, new quarterback, but nonetheless, a team that's playing really good football on both sides of the ball. And one of them in Tyler Warren, who also was most importantly healthy since draft day and throughout all of the offseason. And Colston Loveland, on the other hand, has not been healthy, missed all of OTAs in minicamp, was slow getting rolling at training camp. And we've been saying all along that, hey, might have a slower start to his season, and now suffers an injury in season and misses some time as well. Missed the game against the Raiders there and most of the game against the Cowboys, really, when the injury happened early in that game. And so, yeah, I would think the guy who's been hurt a lot and coming up on a team where everyone's trying to learn all the offense at the same time that has still been slow to get together, yeah, it shouldn't be that surprising that Loveland hasn't been as good as Tyler Warren this season. I also think if you go back in time and you draft Tyler Warren for the Chicago Bears at 10 and Loveland goes to the Colts at 14, I'm guessing Loveland is going to have fairly similar numbers with the Colts right now as what Warren has right now. Maybe not quite 300 yards in 5 games, but he probably is having a pretty strong season. And I would bet Tyler Warren in this Bears offense right now producing closer to where Colston Loveland is and not nearly as much. To me, through 4 games of their careers, now, very small sample size, the tight end comparison says a lot more about the team and the situation they're in than all of a sudden Tyler Warren being this so much clearly head and shoulders above the rest, better than Loveland tight end. Warren is one of the top passing options in their offense. Loveland is the Bears' 4th, 5th passing option behind Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, and then he's probably 4th there, but Swift just gets a lot of carries, a lot of touches out of the backfield. They're just very different situations and very different uses. And so it's hard to grade Colston Loveland so far through his rookie season. because he's missed time and because he was injured, I think generally, I think an incomplete grade, it feels like a cop-out, but it does feel like kind of where I would want to go. But I don't know, is a C too harsh for Colson Loveland? Like, he's not failing, but he's not thriving. I think it's mostly an injury-based C. I'm not worried about Colson Loveland being a bad player. I think he's going to be good and will usurp Cole Kmet by the end of the season and look like someone that you can be really excited about in the Chicago Bears offense. We just haven't had a chance to see it yet because it's still pretty early. I think same is true for the second-round picks in a lot of ways. Like, Luther Burden was also injured for a lot of OTAs and minicamp, but he was good for training camp and the preseason and the first two regular season games. And like generally as a 39th overall pick, he has certainly not been as productive and involved in the offense as you would like them to be. I again think you can explain and or excuse some of it by situationally he's the number 4 receiver in the offense. So maybe the response there is, well, a second round pick should be better than a number 4 receiver in an offense. And I think he should be better than Olamide Zaccheaus. I think I would agree there. I don't think Luther Burden as a rookie should be better than Rome Odunze or DJ Moore. So at best, he'd be your number 3 receiver in an ideal world. And that's not including Colson Loveland, Cole Kmet at tight end, where you're using a lot of 2 tight end sets. You don't even have 3 wide receivers on the field. So like, I'm willing to not panic about Luther Burden just yet either. You know, the big touchdown on the flea flicker was great. He also has a drop pass earlier this season that's frustrating. Like, we haven't seen Luther Burden enough of him in the offense yet to really, see him blossom. So I'm again like C grade. Like, he's definitely been disappointing, but not failing. You're not like, uh-oh, what a terrible draft pick, what a bust. This is a real problem. Like, it seems like, okay, like, there was a slowdown, and we talked about him as another guy who could have a slower start to his career, and so we shouldn't be surprised now when he does. Because I think about these grades are sort of like grades based on expectations, not expectations of a 10th overall pick or a 39th overall pick, but expectations of, okay, when they drafted Colson Loveland, what were we expecting? And now how are they performing to those expectations? Like, we thought they would both start slow. They've both started slow. Like, that's a C type of performance for me. Ozzie Trapillo, on the other hand, he's a D. I mean, I would, you could almost go in the F category here, but that feels a little bit too harsh. Like, because you could say, well, Trapillo hasn't gotten to play, but the fact that he hasn't gotten to play is why he's the D grade. The fact that from the moment they drafted him, they said he's competing at left tackle. And then in the middle of training camp, in the middle of the preseason, they said he can't do left tackle. We got to put him back at right tackle. That's the moment he earned a D grade. And everything since then has been, trying to get on the field and bump that up. But like, the half of a game he played against the Raiders there wasn't very good. And I'm not grading him strongly on that one half of the game, just more so he didn't do anything to boost this grade. Like, he has objectively disappointed and underwhelmed and been a lot less than we thought he would be. And there's still time for that to turn around, but it's been a D from Ozzie Trapillo, and I think it's been a D from Shamar Turner. And like, that's really tough when you have 4 picks in the top 65 of the draft, and you've got a couple of C's and a couple of D's. Shamar Turner was injured for all of training camp in the preseason. I'd kind of give him more an incomplete grade than a D grade, but the couple of games he's been in, he's been bad. And we kind of talked about this on the front end, that yes, we should expect almost nothing from him. So expectations were low, and he's at those low expectations, but it's still just like, man, out of those 4 draft picks, you've gotten very little. And it's not necessarily like any of those individual players' fault. I mean, Trapillo's probably the only one of that group that has been out there and underachieved based on while still having playing time. The other 3 have had injuries that are not their fault and not Ryan Poles' fault. Trapillo's kind of the most disappointing of that group. But I think there's a bigger picture thing here of like, a lot of other teams that had a lot of draft picks are getting more out of those early draft picks than the Bears are, and that's part of why the Bears haven't been as good as we thought they would be. And it's a weird thing where, like, individually, I'm not super worried about any of them, maybe Trapillo the most, but like collectively, it's like, oh crap, you can't have all 4 of those things go wrong at the same time, and that's kind of what it's been for the Bears. It feels a little bit more like bad luck, but I don't want that to excuse Ryan Poles from not picking better players. I also think with all 4 of those guys, there is a lot of their career left. I'm not writing off any of them. I don't think any of them are now quote unquote bad draft picks. I think any and all of the 4 of them can contribute and become potential starting caliber and beyond players in their careers. It's just through the first 4 games, You wanted to get more of an impact from your rookie class overall than you've really gotten. We haven't really seen Hippolyte play much. Frazier's on IR. Luke Newman's hasn't played at all. So like those guys are kind of incomplete grades. And I threw a quick Kyle Mungai grade in here. I think he's a solid B. 7th round pick, number 2 running back, breaking a bunch of tackles. Like he's not an A plus running away with it, but like for a 7th round pick, he's been really solid. I think I'd give him a B grade. But it feels like the impact of the draft class is missing so far, and it does reflect poorly on Ryan Poles in the short term, but what matters more is what those players end up being in the long term. And what matters more in the short term is that the free agents that were brought in to help you in the short term have also been really underwhelming. And I think that's another one of these things that is a bigger impact than maybe we realize when you don't look at them all sort of collectively, but when you think about it individually, it's like, okay, yeah. But together it's like, oh, they're really not getting enough from this group. So we'll take a look at the free agent and trades from the offseason, the veterans that were supposed to make this team better, next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by PrizePicks. Every day we make decisions, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. Playing PrizePicks is so much fun. It's a really simple way to add more excitement to your football Sundays because you just pick more or less on player projections like Caleb Williams' passing yards or DeAndre Swift rushing for a touchdown, and you're in the game. You know, it doesn't even have to just be football, but baseball playoffs, you can pick more or less. Hockey season around the corner, basketball preseason starting up, all of it in PrizePicks just makes the game day experience that much more fun. And it's super quick. You can make your lineup in under a minute. So download the PrizePicks app today and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. So this draft class hasn't had the kind of impact you've been looking for so far, but that's okay for rookies. We can be patient with young players and say it's going to take some time, and individually you can explain on most of it as not that big of a deal. I have a lot harder time explaining that away for the veteran free agents, and I keep saying trades. It was really 2, right? Tooney and Jonah Jackson, and we'll talk about it in a sec, but like Tooney's obviously not really one of the big concerns here, but like if we kind of lump the veteran additions into one category here, it's like, man, they're really not getting much of anything from any of them not named Joe Tooney, and that's the real concern here. And yet I think the really interesting part about this to me is like these free agent and trade signings we'll talk about haven't been very good. And yet, I still feel like they represent upgrades over what the Bears had at their positions last year. Like they're simultaneously underwhelming, disappointing, and not good enough. And also, like, yeah, I'd rather have them than the guy they got rid of to replace him here. So, like, you know, we think about like chronological order. The trades for Jonah Jackson and Joe Tooney happened first. And I think if I had to give a grade for Jonah Jackson so far, I struggled with this. I say D plus. You know, I could maybe get to C minus on you there, but like, you know, like I think an F would be like, this is a disaster. You need to bench him because he's been so bad. And so I'm talking myself into C minus more than D plus, but it's kind of nitpicking at this point. He's been not nearly good enough. He has struggled. He hasn't been horrible, but he's struggled. He's been below average, less than promised, and less than what the Bears need at right guard right now. Like that to me is a C minus D plus player so far. Whereas like Joe Tooney has been solid. I don't think he's been spectacular, but he's been solid. I think hasn't been as strong of a run blocker as I was kind of hoping to, but I'm willing to be, I don't know why I'm willing to be patient with Joe Tooney because I've just seen him be great for so long, and I don't think he just became a worse player. I think it's just some communication and blocking scheme stuff, getting used to a new center and a couple of new left tackles next to him. So like I give Tooney a B, where it's like, because he was an A-plus player coming in and he hasn't been an A-plus player, I'm not going to give him an A, you know, but I think really solid. Like Joe Tooney is the least of your problems anywhere on the offensive line, you know, perfect. He's totally fine. If he does exactly what he's done so far this season for the rest of the year, you will be perfectly happy. That is a B-graded offensive lineman for me. But then Drew Dahlman at center, also underwhelming. You know, you gave him at the time the biggest center contract on the market out there to bring him in and make him your stabilizing force at center for the future. And there have been communication errors. There have been whiffs on blocks. I think he's been better than Jonah Jackson, but still not as good as we hoped he would be, than he was billed to be, than he was promised to be, and not as good as his salary suggests. Like, he is one of the 5 highest paid centers in football. I don't have the exact rankings in front of me at this very moment, but like on a per year basis, I know like Humphrey and Juergens just jumped him. So he's the 3rd highest paid center in football, and he is playing nowhere near like the 3rd best center in football. So I'm again in that like C- kind of range for him. D+ feels harsh because he hasn't been horrible, but like, yeah, C- for Drew Dalman, like not good enough, but not horrible. So I guess we'll take it. But then to me, with Grady Jarrett, maybe has been the biggest of the disappointments, and it's hard for me to not just give Grady Jarrett an F. Like we just have not seen him be anywhere close to good. And it's tough because like he's an important voice and leader in the defensive line room, and I think he's providing a lot of value there that we don't see and we can't measure. And so that's hard to fold into an evaluation and a grade, but like what we see on the field has not been good. He has been blown over in the running game, struggling to hold ground there and keep the linebackers free. He has not been consistently generating a pass rush, and he is getting paid way too much money to not be doing any of those things very effectively. I was just looking on PFF, his pass rush win rate, like how often he is beating the offensive lineman in front of him. I think I'd say it was bottom 20 or bottom 25 among defensive tackles in the league. Like he's outside of the top 100 players at his position in rushing the passer. And he's not like, a top 5 highest paid defensive tackle in football, but he's not cheap either. He's making $14.2 million a year. Like he's making a little less than Dalvin Tomlinson of the Steelers and Cam Hayward of the Steelers, Dalvin Tomlinson of the Cardinals. Like he's making more than DJ Reader of the Lions and, David Onyemata of the Falcons and Grover Stewart of the Colts. Like Jarrett has been a below average player making a top 30 salary at the position. That is not acceptable. Like the whole thing was like Dennis Allen needs interior pass rushers. This was one of their big signings. It's supposed to change the culture of the defensive line and be this mentor for Javon Dexter and everything. And like he was bad, and now he's hurt. And I'm trying not to like grade a player worse because of their injury. I was giving that grace to the rookies, and I'm not necessarily grading him down because he's hurt, but also like they need him out there and he's not. They were counting on him, and he has not been good enough when he's on the field, and now he's not on the field. And we knew he had a little bit of a down year in Atlanta last year, but like wasn't this bad. He's got to figure something out. Maybe this injury thing has been lingering longer than he just hasn't been healthy at all season, and maybe this time away he can get a little bit healthier and come back after the bye week or whenever that's going to be and start playing better. But boy, it's been a massive, massive disappointment. I think the most disappointing of any of these guys, because I had low expectations for Jonah Jackson, and I wondered if Drew Dalman you got to overpay a little bit in free agency. So I was, I could kind of temper the expectations a little bit more for those guys. But Jarrett's been a good player and is not that here in Chicago. You could throw Dayo Odengbo in the other category of like, I think we had low expectations for Dayo Odengbo, and he hasn't been great, but we didn't think he would be great despite getting paid a lot of money. And so he's another one I struggled with. Like, he hasn't been terrible, but you're paying him $18 million a year. You're paying him like he's someone who's good to very good, and he's been mediocre to below average. And so like I was back in this sort of C- range, like D plus felt a little too harsh, C felt a little bit too good. Like he hasn't been horrible, he just hasn't been very good. And so the thing that confounds me about this a little bit is I look at this and I was like, okay, like Jonah Jackson, low grade, Grady Jarrett, low grade, Dayo Odengbo, mediocre grade, Drew Dalman, mediocre grade. Like the big money you spent on the offensive and defensive lines, the big money you spent to fix the 2 biggest positions of need hasn't really been nearly as good as you need it to be. And that feels like a disaster and like a fire Ryan Pulse, pitchforks and torches kind of thing. And yet, like, you look at what they replaced, and I still think you're better off. Maybe, your dollar for dollar value isn't where you want it to be. But like when you talk about the offensive line, right? And Joe Tooney replacing Tevin Jenkins, upgrade. Jonah Jackson replacing Nate Davis. Not a high bar to clear, but absolutely an upgrade. And Drew Dahlman replacing Coleman Shelton. Definitely an upgrade. Like all three of those positions, despite them underwhelming a little bit, are still improved from where they were last year. Perhaps not as much improved as we wanted to or thought they should be, but it is still improvement. It's not maybe dollar for dollar, $18 million worth of improvement at some of those positions, but like it is better. But it's the degree of which it's better that maybe is the actual problem here. Like same thing on the defensive line. Dayo Odengbo replaces DeMarcus Walker. Like Odengbo hasn't been great, but I think he's been better than what DeMarcus Walker was. And like Grady Jarrett didn't even really replace any defensive tackles. They just added him to the group that was already, I mean, I guess he replaced Zach Pickens at this point. Like I don't know that Jarrett has been like, he's been bad, but like they're net improved on defensive tackle right now from where they were last year because it's the same group plus Grady Jarrett, like and Shamar Turner, I guess. Like that's an improved group. And then you think about Colston Loveland being an upgrade over number 2 tight end Gerald Everett, absolutely. Even Ozzie Trapillo, like if he's replacing Larry Borum, like that's, if not improvement, a push, right? I mean, I don't think he got worse with a backup tackle there. And certainly the ceiling is a lot higher for what Trapillo can still become there. So like, it's just a weird thing where simultaneously it feels like these additions are all not doing enough. And that's why the Bears haven't been, it's a big part of why the Bears haven't been better. And yet they are still better than what they had last year. And that's why they have been a little bit better than last year. Like not how they started, I suppose, but like the Bears beat up on some bad teams last year, but like we're seeing progress from this team. So it's just a weird group to kind of evaluate here. And that's kind of the point of what I wanted to get at the podcast today, because I think it's a combination of that and then the moves Ryan Poles didn't make that we were saying, hey, you should probably address this. And they didn't in a real meaningful way. And I don't want to do this with hindsight and say, well, now we can look at it and say they should have known, but instead, like, no, what we knew at the time, and maybe those gaps also being another major contributor we'll take a closer look at next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. From footwork to breathwork, you know that athletes sweat all the details, and Mazda brings this same intention to how they craft every model. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS top safety pick awards than anyone else. You can feel that Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from metallic accents to available Nappa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth sailing to intuitive controls. And with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like the players, Mazda sweats every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Just as much as maybe the Bears' moves they made weren't or haven't been as productive right away as we thought they would, and that feels to me like maybe the single biggest like big picture lever holding them back. I also think we're still seeing the ripple effects and echoes of the moves they didn't make and the holes still left on the roster, the weaknesses still on the roster. That's like, yeah, I get you can't do everything every offseason. You can't overturn every position, but also it's frustrating when there's something that you see as a weakness ahead of time and it doesn't get addressed, and lo and behold, it then becomes a weakness. Like, let me start with an example that's not this to kind of paint the picture for you. So like, for example, I want to avoid using hindsight here and say, well, now we can clearly see that this is a problem, but we didn't know that in March. We didn't know that in April. An example of that is the cornerback position, where, yeah, it's a problem right now with Nashawn Wright and Nick McLeod in there with Tyreek Stevenson. Like, cornerback room is not good or deep enough. But no one in March, April, May was saying, oh, the Bears really got to address cornerback. And whenever I mentioned a cornerback as a possible draft pick on the podcast, there was a lot of like, no way, we're not drafting a cornerback. Because Ryan Poles wasn't supposed to know that Jalen Johnson would go on injured reserve, Terrell Smith would go on injured reserve, Zay Frazier would go on injured reserve, and then, Jalen Jones would be injured early on when they try and make an addition. Like, the injuries have stacked up at cornerback, and have been largely unlucky. Like that feels a less. Oh, of course, I didn't mention Kyler Gordon missing the first 4 games of the season, or 3.5 games, whatever it is. Like I don't blame Ryan Poles for not doing more, for not anticipating they'd have 5 injured cornerbacks to start the season. Like sure, you can blame him for like not trying to add more depth since week 1, but like big picture, I'm not going to kill them for that being like a preventable problem. But you know what does feel like something we saw coming the whole time? The lack of pass rush. We talked about it in March. We talked about it in the draft. We talked about it in the lead up to training camp. Are they going to spend big money on an edge rusher? Well, they kind of did in Dayo Odengbo. Are they going to use a high draft pick on an edge rusher? They kind of did in Shamar Turner, and then moved him, made him defensive tackle. He'd kind of done both in college. And so it's like, all right, well, like got through the offseason and still didn't feel like the pass rush was properly addressed. And we talked after the draft, like, okay, are they going to sign one of the lingering free agents? Are they going to blockbuster trade for, Trey Hendrickson? I don't think TJ Watt was ever actually available, but his name came up. Or we didn't think Micah Parsons was actually available and he gets traded. And all along the way, you get to training camp and it's like, hey, you still haven't addressed pass rusher. Can you go out and sign one of these lingering guys? Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, Von Miller was out there for a while. Jadeveon Clowney was out there for a while. There were a bunch of names that aren't, household game changers. A lot of them older guys that aren't going to, they're not going to totally take over your whole defense, but just, hey, there seems to be this weakness on the roster, and it's been a weakness for 4 off seasons in a row where we talk every year about signing Yannick Ngakoue, and still it has not been addressed. And that feels like a big thing, a big problem, a big lingering, like, hey, yeah, no wonder you started a little slow this season because you had a problem that we knew about, and lo and behold, it turned out to be a problem there. I think this was also part of the conversation at left tackle. Now, I personally have long been a supporter of Braxton Jones, and so I was not out here loudly advocating for a new left tackle. And I think a lot of the struggles we've seen from Braxton Jones are more injury related, and I'm certainly not like, I'm in favor of giving Theo Bennett the try there by all means. But my point being, like, I'm not going to gaslight you and say I thought the Bears should have made a left tackle change this offseason. But a lot of Bears fans were talking about, hey, maybe you should do more at left tackle. And they used a second round pick on a player they thought was going to be a left tackle. They tried to address it. And yet the problem that was a problem still is a problem. And Karan Amagaji's on injured reserve, and it's just like one little thing after the other there, kind of a known issue. And in a similar vein as that, like the running game, I too I'm not a big DeAndre Swift fan, but I have been saying all offseason they're not going to replace him. They've raved about DeAndre Swift at every possibility, and every message they've ever sent is we like DeAndre Swift. And yet the running game is still struggling. And Bears fans are worried about the running game struggling coming into the season. We're worried about the running backs not being good enough, and we're 4 weeks in, and lo and behold, doesn't feel like the running backs are good enough. And, you 7th round pick in Kyle Monunga, I'm a big fan. I think he's playing well, etc. But like, it just feels like there have been these bigger preventable issues that we knew could and would and will end up being issues in the regular season that are now issues in the regular season. And we were talking about it back then. It's not like cornerback where it just became an issue and there was no way to know this was going to be coming. Like you could have seen the pass rush issues coming. You could have seen the left tackle issues coming. You could have seen the running game, at least the running back issues coming. Maybe we didn't necessarily think the offensive line would have this many struggles. We didn't necessarily think Grady Jarrett would be this bad. I mean, maybe we had inklings that Dayo Odengbo could underwhelm, but like some of that stuff we all were wrong about. And then there's some of the stuff that I think we were right about, and the team, for whatever reason, chose not to address it. And it's really easy to sit here and say, well, why didn't you sign X, Y, or Z player, or draft X, Y, or Z player, or trade for X, Y, or Z player? And that player isn't always available. You think, well, he's a free agent, so why don't you just sign him? And, well, maybe he wants more money than you can offer, or doesn't want to go to your team because he wants to go to a team he sees a contender. Like, I'm willing to give, general managers in general some benefit of the doubt that, like, we aren't just sitting here playing Madden and you can't just go to the free agent list and hit X and offer them the contract and they accept it every time. Like, I get that it's not as simple as saying just sign him, but at the same time, it wasn't just one player at one position, right? It was like address edge rusher in any of these dozen different ways, address running back in any of these different ways, address offensive line in any of these ways. Like, at least one of those options had to have been realistic. Like they could have done more, and they chose not to, and that's their prerogative. And I'm sure there are times when there's a position they choose not to address, and they end up being right. But it's frustrating when they don't, and they end up being wrong. And it always feels bad when you feel like you've got like you're sitting at home on your couch saying, I saw this coming, and it feels like the team didn't. I mean, I don't think they didn't see it coming. I just think they calculated it differently, and maybe that calculation was wrong. And that's how we get to a slow 2-2 start, but 2-2 with 2 back-to-back wins entering the bye week, winnable games coming out of the bye week, and plenty of reason for more optimism moving forward out of the bye week. We'll break down the Commanders matchup as the week goes on right here in the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen today, be sure to check out the Locked On NFL podcast, because I co-host it every Tuesday morning with Tyler Rowland from Locked On Titans, who hosts it every single day. And we're talking about the Monday night Chiefs-Jaguars game, Trevor Lawrence, Patrick Mahomes, really going back and forth down to the end there too. But then we talked about which teams in each division are we most confident are going to hold on and win those divisions, like the Detroit Lions, I think, and which team leading a division not so confident that somebody's going to fall apart or somebody's going to come back and win some of these divisions as well. So lots of good football talk over at Locked On NFL. Just make sure you come on back to Locked On Bears tomorrow for another opportunity to bear down.